Hello, everyone. We're gonna give it a second to let everyone just kind of come on in since we just opened it up, and then we'll do introductions and get on with the program for today. All right. Well, welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming out and making time to join us this evening. It's much appreciated. I think we got a really great panel for you, and we'll get to them in one quick second with our introductions. If you haven't seen me before, I'm John Lohr, Vice President of STEM Education here with Science Olympiad, and I work in our national office. And we got three fantastic coaches from around the country. And starting with Sharice, we'll let them introduce themselves and kind of give you a little bit about their Science Olympiad background.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sharice Fiorina. I'm the head coach for Solon High School. I only have Division C. Our team right now is about 80 students, and this is my 7th year coaching. We are actually wrapping up our season. We have our last invitational this weekend, regionals next weekend, and then hopefully on to states.
All right. Tim, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Tim Lunt, and what used to be the state director of Alaska and coached up there many years. Now I'm at Merritt Academy in Colorado, outside of Colorado Springs, and I have basically 6th grade through 10th grade because that's how far our school goes to right now. Next year we'll add 11th grade, so we have about 33 kids in both two B teams and one C team this year. And we have our region meet Saturday and state meet on April 6th.
All right. And
a week from Saturdays, I should say, for regions.
Hi there. I'm York Chan. I'm the Science Olympiad coach here at Bell Elementary School. It's a Chicago public school. We have, I've been doing this for about 6 years now, and we have 3 teams that we're running Division B. So we have 1 varsity and 2 junior varsity teams. It's a little bit, a struggle to try to keep track of 40 plus kids, but we're trying to make it happen. And, happy to be here to help answer any questions.
Fantastic. And then last but certainly not least, my colleague from the national office, Dan Nichols, has joined us, and I'll let Dan tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi everyone, Dan Nichols. I am a Science Olympiad lifer. I've been doing it since 1989 when I was a student competitor. I'm the national program director here at the national office now, but I coached for about 25 years in Indiana at Whiting High School. And I was the state director in Indiana, and I'm currently the inquiry committee chair as well. So a variety of background for me. So I'm here if you have any specific questions for me.
All right. And for you guys, if you would drop your name, your state, maybe, what division you're coaching in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you do that, just want to remind you that the meeting is being recorded. We'll get the materials to you later this week. You'll receive an email with a link to the video. I have to do a little bit of cleanup and editing to get rid of some of the awkwardness of myself on the front end, as well as while we're waiting for everybody to get here, as well as we'll probably have to clean up a little bit on the back end too. If you have questions, please throw them in either the chat or use the Q&A feature here in Zoom, and we will get to you through that, and we'll kind of do our best to get your questions answered and to give you some guidance. But while you think of some questions, I have a couple I want to throw out to the group. And one of the biggest ones that I think I've always struggled with, and it keeps me up at night, is like, what as a coach like what should I be bringing with, or what should my team be bringing with, to make sure we have on hand at the tournament? Besides, like, the obvious stuff of our devices and our notebooks and that kind of thing. Like, what's the stuff someone might not think of? And I'll throw it out to my esteemed colleagues.
All right, well, I'll jump in. Handful of things that I have on my list are every device and every student who's a builder should have their own repair kit. So they're not relying on somebody else, and they have backup materials or repair materials for their devices. We have a team goggle box. York, I think you call yours a go box. We have one on wheels, and it has all of our goggles that the team shares, the calculators, the lab aprons, and the stopwatches. It also has a first aid kit. I cannot tell you the number of band-aids we go through between practice and travel. It's always, Coach, do you have a band-aid? I should just, staple them to their forehead. A couple other things, not the obvious ones, but medical forms and Ziploc bags, both trash bags and different size of Ziploc bags. They're really good when something falls, something gets broken, someone is puking, you need to gather things up in a home base. They work for a variety of uses that you might need them for.
All right.
Yeah, I would say that I typically organize my bins, and I have a bin of extra lab equipment. I have an extra bin of office supplies, things like tape, extra calculators, extra protractors, a lot of those types of random type things that just seem to be missing from students' kits when we arrive at the tournaments. I always have like copies of schedules for everybody. So I've got a Excel spreadsheet that I work out and make sure that I know where everybody's supposed to be, which events, and I make printouts of those for everybody so that everybody has a copy of that to go around with them that day. And if we're on like a larger campus or something like that, I'll have maps and things like that for both the coaches, the parent volunteers, and the students, so that everybody hopefully can get around without any issues. And then garbage bags is kind of a random thing that pops up where we need to make sure that we keep our rooms clean and stuff like that. So that's something that we keep in our bags.
And I'll just add that too, is that trash bags are great. I also provide a lot of snacks for the kids. I figure if they're hungry, they're not going to do as well. If they have a full stomach, their brain's going to be more active and ready to go. I also throw in a bunch of staplers. Again, we talked before, make sure you check with the event supervisor, but it's a lot easier and faster for the kids to take the test if you separate the test. One does half of it, the other one does the other half, switch and conquer, and then staple it back in order and turn it in. That has saved us and increased our scores tremendously. Scissors, tape, anything possibly that they can need, rulers, stopwatches. I always have extras, extra stuff in their Crime Busters kits, extra stuff for forensics kits. Just make sure you have extra of everything in case something breaks or gets lost or something like that.
I'll jump in and add two things to that. One thing that we didn't take with us, but we always did when we first get to our homeroom location, is whoever the first coach in the room was, they always took a picture or a video of what it looked like, so that you can make sure that that room goes back as close to exactly as you found it when you leave, to help keep the host site happy. And one thing I learned over the years is I kept an emergency resource sheet folder that I always put out where the kids knew where it was. It was near our goggles and aprons and that. But if a kid couldn't find their resource sheet for Dynamic Planet, we would have extra copies of those in that folder, so that if they ever called back to the homeroom to get a resource sheet, that they had that folder with the extras in it, so you didn't have to try to hunt through and find where the kid left it. So if you ever needed an emergency one, so we had an emergency folder there. So two things that we always did at the tournaments when I was there.
Thanks, guys. And I want to say, Sharice shared when we were chatting earlier, and I never thought of it, but the the gallon-sized Ziploc bags are awesome if you have a student that gets car sick on the bus. Is a wonderful aid, and you know, I would have been trying to get the nasty garbage bucket back to them, and it's probably much easier with a couple of Ziploc bags. The other question I had, Dan, you kind of brought it up about the resource sheets. Do you guys, obviously it makes sense. I could see having the resource sheet. Do you bring extra copies of, like, you know, physics says you can have a binder of any size. So do you have an extra optics binder just in case, or how do you do that with the kids in terms of kind of the larger packages of resources?
Considered it. One of our parent volunteers has wanted us to do that for every single one of the binders. It is just probably a little bit overwhelming to try to deal with maybe like 200 to 300 pages of some of these binders to have an extra set of those. So ideally, we would like to have that. Whether or not we execute that on a regular basis it's kind of a case by case basis.
Yeah, and since I have Division C, we put a lot of responsibility on the student. I can understand middle schoolers is a different world, but at the high school level, we expect them to bring their own binders, and if they forget them, there's not a resource sheet back in our home base that they can get. However, their partner is also told to bring their binder. Usually they can only take one, so there is a backup. It may not be the best one of the two, it may not be the one they're most familiar with, but we do tell both partners to bring all of their resources so that if one forgets, the other one does have it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. In your experience, have you ever, like, and I know, I mean, Dan says he's a lifer, and I know, Sharice, you've been doing this for a number of years, and same thing, Tim, and now York, you've got a number of years under your belt. Have you ever run into a situation where, like, oh my God, we lost a binder, forgot a binder, spilled a 2-liter on a binder? Okay.
Yeah, we put, go ahead, Dan.
No, ours happened at our state tournament. It was one of the binders for the identification event. So that was an evening of, you know, using the hotel lobby printer and trying to print off as much as they could to recreate what they had forgot back at school.
We've spent a lot of Friday nights printing, but our rule is there is no printing at the hotel because you never know, right? So I mean, they can't expect to print at the hotel. So we always start with your printing should be done on Thursday, not Friday, not Friday night, not Saturday morning. It should be done on Thursday. That doesn't always work, but that kind of is the rule. We did have a binder get left in home base at a pretty important tournament. We happened to have someone in their young 20s who was into track, and they ran it, which is good because if they had me, I'd have been trying to lit along and they'd have got it about halfway through the event. So we've left it behind and we've left it home. We've certainly done that.
Okay. And you've talked about home base or the homeroom a little bit. Do you guys, now Dan talked about making sure you have a picture so you know what it should look like or how you can reset it when you get there. Do you guys do anything other than rearranging? Do you decorate? Do you you mean do anything special about the space you're going to be in for the day, or is it pretty much focused on that's where you're at, let's keep it clean, let's just do our events?
Well, I can tell you that what I do is again, like Dan says, I don't so much take a picture, but I do look at the rooms myself as the head coach, make sure they're all nice and neat, and then when we're done, usually there's a gap between the last event and awards, and that's the time where the whole team goes in and cleans the room, packs up stuff, make sure all the trash is put into trash bags. Trash bags are put outside the room, and then everything else is loaded back on the bus to return back home before we even go to the wards.
We don't decorate. We do have a mascot that gets hauled around with us and goes to every home base, I think, that we've ever seen for the last 6-7 years. But we don't decorate. They do put some things on the board and they've done some pretty amazing artwork on the board, but we don't particularly decorate around.
We have a team banner that goes outside the room, just kind of announcing that that's that's where we were. So that's about the only decorating that we would have done.
Yeah, that's actually on our list of things to acquire is actually a banner, because we have found that we're seeing that a lot of tournaments and want to have one ourselves.
Um, Makes sense. So moving beyond kind of home base and would encourage anybody, if you're ready, go ahead, type your questions into Q&A, and we're more than happy to get to specific questions or wonderings that you may have about getting ready. So how, and this goes back to a story that a fellow coach shared with me, that they had a student who was, I think was doing their plane, and the kid was at the back end of the line getting off the bus, and as he gets off the bus, he trips, falls on the plane. So the plane is wiped out, and it turned out he then decided he'd stopped following after the group because he's picking up the pieces and everything, called his mom and went home. So like, how do you handle like instructions and last minute emergencies like that? And like, what are some of the guidelines you give to your kids?
All right, they're all muted. I'll jump in here, John. Everything is boxed.
Okay.
I hate it when I see a kid at a tournament walking around with a tower in their hand or a bridge in their hand. It just makes me want to run over and put it in a box. So first of all, everything is boxed so that it can be stacked both on the bus, and my truck is used quite frequently for all of the extra mechanicals. So everything must be boxed. They are all supposed to have repair kits and extra materials with them. But again, I'm dealing with Division C.
Yep.
And again, it's not a seventh grader who's destroyed their first plane. I've got a 16-year-old and I'm like, you're not going home, go to home base. Very different dynamic and conversation. But we do expect them to be able to repair most things. Obviously, if they totally squish their plane, they're going to have to put something together so that it is not a no-show, so that they at least show up and do their best. Our students are not allowed to leave with parents. That's a board rule. I don't know if it's a state rule. We have special transportation forms that are required 24 hours in advance if a student is leaving. So that obviously wouldn't be 24 hours in advance. So no student leaves. If they're sick, it's a whole different ball of wax because I want to send them home, but they can't just go home.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that for us, I mean, our students pretty much know that they are under kind of our supervision for the entire time that we have the competition. And so that they always make sure that they're checking out with one of the parent volunteers or with the coach. That we have a master list basically of making sure that we know who's still in attendance or who has departed. We haven't really had that type of a situation before where anybody really wants to leave. I mean, our kids mostly truly want to be there, and it's like a social event for them anyway, so that they actually like to be together outside of school time and hanging out with each other. So have not really had that situation where somebody has departed suddenly that way.
I'll jump in too. It's same thing for us. We have a little different situation for where I'm at, is that we have some parents that live 45 minutes away from our school, even west of us. So there's a group of 5 or 6 parents and with their kids, and they'll usually get a hotel at either CSU Pueblo or in Colorado Springs and spend the night. The rest of the kids will either carpool with parents, or this year we're starting to take buses. And so, yeah, the kids are not allowed to leave until the end of the competition. And then they have to check out with me if they're going to go home with a parent. They can't go home with a non-parent. They have to go home with a parent unless the note is given prior to the competition.
All right. All right, we got our first question from our attendees. And this one is, from a coaching perspective, what balance do you strike between you helping prepare the binders with the kids and asking the students to kind of prepare their own binders? So like, kind of where do you fall? And then if you leave it to them, do you offer any guidance?
We are never preparing a binder for the
in on
kids.
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we are never preparing a binder for the students because we feel that the students need to know the binders. They need to know the material that are in their binders, so that they can find it on demand at the competition. We always try to reinforce to them that they should organize a binder to how they want to operate and work, and that they should be very familiar with the binder so that they can find the information quickly. It's not something that they should be relying on in a way where they are looking up the information, because I think that's what would happen if an adult prepared the binder. Then they would have to go and try to figure out, how to find that information, and that's not really learning the event, is our perspective on that.
And I agree with that too, as I know in Colorado, I do not do their binders for them. I will print them off because the kids are not allowed to print anything off. So they have to send it to me and I'll print it off. And so if I have a new kid coming in, we may share notes, or the kids may be like the B team and A team may share their notes between them, but I'm not providing them. The kids are providing it with each other. Like I tell the kids, I'm the only coach doing both B and C. So I got 46 events to know something about, but they have to be expert on their events, since they only have 3, 4, 5 events to do. And they have to have what's resources they need for that event. And hopefully they'll bring that in.
Yeah, and we're firm believers that the process of building the binder, you're learning a lot about your event. And so no one helps them. We do have event captains who provide like a list of resources. Here's resources where you can go look for things. Sometimes they will share format. Some of the ID events, like fossils or ornithology, they may share a template and they may even split up some of like the birds, so-and-so is doing 10, so-and-so is doing 10, but not everything about it. So even then, when they get their stash from other people, there's still a lot they need to go fill in themselves because otherwise they don't know it. Taking that to a cheat sheet, we tell them at the beginning of the year, put everything on your cheat sheet, and as you learn it, take the things off that you know and add the things that you don't as you take new tests. So your cheat sheet's going to get too full if you put every single thing on it. So as you learn it and you know it, you drop that off and make new room for things that you're finding on tests you don't know. But we do not prepare anything, and it's rare that I will even print for them. They have to be independent on their own. But again, I have high school.
Right.
It's a different world.
Okay. So that leads me into a question I had is like, so if every kid is doing, or every partner is effectively doing their own kind of binders and stuff, how do you go about, let's say, Sharice, you and I we're going to do anatomy and physiology, and I'm an idiot the night before and I split my head open at the pool. So I'm out and Dan's going to replace me with York or somebody. Like, how do you go about identifying who to replace kids with for those kind of last minute swaps and changes?
It depends on what kind of tournament it is, John. If we're looking at states, we actually have identified backups for each person on the team at the time we build the team. They're either someone on the team who can step in and continues to train for that event, even though they're not technically scheduled in it, or we have alternates who can step into those roles. And again, they continue to take tests and study right alongside the people in the event. If it's just an invitational, then if there's somebody on the team who can step in, great. Frequently we travel with alternates because we use them to help run events and they go and watch mechanicals and learn. If we've got somebody who's an alternate, then we would drop them in. We tell them to bring their materials, right? So you have more materials than you need coming to an invitational because you just don't know who's going to slip and split their head open.
Okay. York, Tim, Dan, any thoughts on how you handle subbing kids and that?
I mean, we're not that formal necessarily about it, but we do go to upwards of like 5 to 6 invitationals through the year, and not everybody can always make all of those different tournaments. And so what happens is that everybody kind of has a little bit of a history of filling in and doing some different events. And if we have that kind of a last minute need, we will ask the students and see, who is feeling qualified or who feels that, they've had enough experience to kind of sub in to work with one of their other teammates at that point. So, knock on wood, we haven't had that issue necessarily at a regionals or at a state competition. So hopefully that doesn't come up for us.
Well, speaking of that, I just had this in past week, or actually yesterday. I had one of my top middle school kids that's on my A team, and we're short number of kids anyway. Like we have 9 kids on one team, 11 on another one, and he decided to go play on an elite baseball game tournament a week and a half before regions. And with that case, we're going, that's not the great choice since she knew about the schedule since August. But so what I do is I go look at the schedule and see who can help his partner in the events. And because, most of the events he can't do by himself. He can't do towers by himself. He can't do the plane by himself because he can't wind it. So I have to find an alternative person that can fill in and do the best they can to get us hopefully through regions and qualified for state. And so I hate it when that happens. I had the same thing a couple weeks ago with one of our top high school kids. Was the only senior on the team. Got to worry about scholarships. Has an outing or something scheduled for a region meet. So now we're trying to figure out how do we get a kid in 2 weeks to program a robot and also to program detective building. So that's going to give us some challenge, and it's still a challenge every day. So, but all I can say is go in and do your best you can. And if you try, at least you won't get a 0, so, and you at least get some participation points and see what happens from there.
Okay.
So John, we had a similar thing to Charisse with our students. We would have them when they signed up for events at the beginning of the season. We would always have them sign up for at least 2 additional ones that they weren't necessarily competing in. So we always had backups that were at least familiar with the topics and that had some interest in that. So those were basically our subs that we would look to if someone were ill or unable to be there that day.
Okay. I'm kind of building off this and coming back. Earlier we touched on this idea about, all right, none of your kids are leaving for a variety of reasons without checking in with you, whether it's school policy or it's the relationship and stuff you've set up. How do you, this particular, I think York and Tim will have a lot on this, is like, how do you handle the kids on a campus, right? Because a lot of these tournaments are going to be at big university campuses and stuff's kind of spread out. Like, do you have particular roles and rules? And I'm sure Charisse, like, you also have to do some stuff with, some of your high school kids because you don't want them going off with college guys.
I mean, I would say with us, we typically, based on the time of the year here in Chicago, most of these competitions are happening in the wintertime. So they're not necessarily hanging out outside as much. But when we do end up at a place where it's a nice day and there's, places for them to hang out outside, we just make sure that they're always checking in with us and they're staying together as a group and they're hanging out together as a group nearby, so that we can easily find them. So like when we're at the University of Illinois, depending on where their homeroom is, they might be hanging out, just out in the quad area right in front of our building. So we give them some of that latitude, but that's also deeper into the season for us. And so we have some trust built in, knowing the behaviors and stuff like that of our students. And so fortunately, again, no issues so far.
Well, and for my team up in Colorado, it's, I'm fortunate enough to have Science Olympiad as a class. So they get basically a double exam for each of the competitions. And so they're graded on their behavior and how well not necessarily how well they do, but as long as they get to the event, they're not put in tier 2 and do the best they can, they get their points. But if they're messing around, they're making a mess of the team room, then they'll lose points. And as a result, I have no issue with that. The only other rule I do put in is that if they go anywhere, they need to go with a partner. So like when we get to the campus, we usually are there an hour before impound. And so I'll have the kids team up or grab their partner, and they'll go from their homeroom and to use the map and their schedule. And they'll go to every event. And I just don't want them to go to, hey, yeah, it's in that building. I want them to go up and look into that room if there's a window, so they know exactly where Right at Do It is, where optics is, or astronomy is, whatever the case, whatever the event is. I want to make sure they know exactly where it's going to be and how long it's going to take them to get there. And as a result, I've had very minimal issues over the last 20 plus years.
Yeah, similar. We do the same thing, Tim, only we call it touch the doorknob. You don't get to just go to the building. You don't get to just go to the floor, because sometimes there's only one way into a specific room, and you have to go in, a certain set of stairs or through a certain set of doors in order to find that room. So we tell them they have to touch the doorknob, and we have them walk their schedules just like you do. The other thing is, on a college campus, if they're going to an event, they often can't be with someone else. They're not all on the same schedule. But if they're going any place to lunch, if they're just going for a walk, they are expected to have at least one other person with them, and they are not allowed off campus. If I catch somebody off campus, they don't travel with me, because trust is key. If I don't trust you, I don't take you. And I would like to say that that's a perfect thing. It's not. I did have one student 2 years ago decide that they were just going to not go to home base. They were going to go off campus to the coffee shop. That was the first thing they did. Of course, they got caught, because that's what happens. And she didn't travel with me for a year. And I didn't have a problem with anybody else, because they knew that I meant it. When I tell you that you're supposed to be, where you've told me and where it's expected, or there'll be consequences. So, sorry that it happened once. She really wasn't doing anything terrible, but she wasn't where I trusted her to be.
Along those lines, do you set any rules or expectations around like trips to the bookstore, gift shop, the Starbucks run for the kids? So particularly for like the younger guys, knowing how much money to bring or that kind of thing?
It depends on where the event is occurring. So sometimes if it's like a self-contained at like a middle school, the organizers of that invitational, will have like food trucks or have things that are just there on campus, which makes it easier for our students to access. When we end up going to something that's like on a university campus where things are a little bit more spread out, we'll mention that certain things might be available, but typically we don't suggest any of that, just because it's a little hard to keep track of everybody. And so we don't necessarily let them go out on their own. Maybe after all the events are done, they can go out with one of our parent volunteers, something like that, over to, Starbucks or over to the bookstore or something like that. But typically during the day, we've got so much going on that we're not allowing that.
So no like duckling little trips and like, okay, guys, we're, after we compete, before we go to awards or something, we're all going to swing through the bookstore or something like that.
Yeah, that's when we'll do it, when everything is kind of calmed down and stuff like that, that we have that flexibility. Because I think during the heat of the day, when all these different events are going on, we want to make sure everybody's at the right places and that people are in the right mindset for the competition.
And John, if I can jump in here,
Yeah.
one of the things that I stressed with my students, along with you're on a bigger campus, you're never alone, but you're also wearing a shirt that says our school name on it, and you are there representing yourselves, your team, our school, and our community. And we always just reiterated with the students what that meant and what those expectations were, and that you were standing on the shoulders of all the students that had came before you, and the legacy of our team. So you had a certain expectation behavior, and you had a certain expectation of how you comported yourself. So I think that was also one of the things that helped us with the culture that we were able to create with our team, and just so that, you know, we were a respected group. We weren't always the best team there, but we were probably one of the ones that people looked to for help if they needed it, or if, you know, they wanted a good example of how to hold yourself. They looked at the Whiting team. So that was also one of the things that I always stressed with the students before, you know, either the night before or the morning of in the homeroom.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I would agree with that, Dan. We talk a lot with our kids. I mean, safety's number one. So you don't go anywhere alone if you don't have to. And after that, it's all about honesty, integrity, and representing the team well, right? Be the nice team, make sure that you share things if people need things, not to put your own device at risk, but if you have something in your repair kit that will help someone else, or they need a pair of goggles, loan it out. Be nice, be polite to your event supervisors. I mean, there is an expectation of behavior for the Solon team. They're expected to treat event supervisors well. They're expected to treat parents and adults they run into well, or who are in our home base. They're expected to treat each other well, our bus drivers, all of that. So I would agree with you, Dan, if you set those expectations and you do it often enough and frequently enough, it just becomes part of the culture of your team. And if it doesn't happen, you don't usually have to address it because the other students will.
Exactly.
Oh, that's a great point about being respectful, Charisse, because especially for some of these tournaments, you know, the kids may have spent way more time with the rules and the in and outs of the event than some of the event supervisors or some of the volunteers. So,
Like,
you know, being nice and being polite and kind of, you know, knowing how to work with the adults is really an important skill to carry with you.
I tell the parents it's a life skill. Their student needs to learn how to disagree with another person in a polite way without it causing an argument, knowing when to disengage and come ask the coaches for help if it's needed.
Yeah, no, that's
Yes.
a great point.
I was just going to say that we always emphasize to our team members that they should know the rules well enough that they should be able to advocate for themselves in the environment that wherever they are, whether it's a lab or whether it's a testing event, so that they can refer to their knowledge, you know, from the rules to talk to the event supervisors appropriately.
Okay. So we got another question got dropped in, and this one's looking for guidance around builds, and they particularly mentioned flight and towers. So here's what they ask. In your experience, by what time/day do you assess building events should be finished? For builds that have to be remade or fixed, like have to make a new plane because of a crash, or building the tower for the competition, like how much lead time do you like to see? And then how much kind of testing and kind of fine tuning do you generally want the kids to have?
Our devices are typically built in the November timeframe because our first invitationals are in November and December. We also hold an internal scrimmage so that we can check devices and see if they meet the rules. You know, the rules are complicated, and even though they've read them and hopefully read them 3 or 4 times, it's always good to make a, you know, quick check or have them check each other and run their devices. If they break something during the season, then they, you know, they need to get it rebuilt as soon as possible. I am in a slightly different position in that we have more students than we can take on any given weekend. So if somebody has a device that's broken, they either wouldn't get scheduled for that event, they may get scheduled to, you know, to compete in their other events, or they wouldn't get scheduled that weekend while they had enough time to rebuild. And calibration, it's as much time as they're willing to put in on our Thursday nights or our Sundays, or at home.
Yeah, I can agree with that too. You know, things like flight, for us, it depends on, we try to get the kits early. Like you say, in October, and then start building and flying, because we usually have a competition in December. But one thing that we are limited to is gym space. So how we get the gym to do the flight is how much practice time they get. So I try to get as much as we can, but that's our big limitation. All the other events, scrambler, wheeled vehicle, things like that, air trajectory, roller coaster, those things the kids are constantly testing and modifying and tweaking, but they are told to keep a log on everything. And so they should be logging down today's data, and just in case they don't get another opportunity, so they're ready to go. And then things like towers, it depends on how fast they can build it. Most of my kids can build the tower within in about 50 minutes. So they may build one day, test it the next day, and then build another one the next day. So it just depends on what events they want to work on a given day.
In your experience, do your kids make a lot of changes? So Sharice, you're talking about, okay, you got stuff kind of locked in for your early tournaments in December. Are they building a lot of new cars, or making significant changes to the plane from December to now? Or are they really just kind of working with the one and making tweaks and stuff like that?
Our good flyers typically will build, our experienced flyers, I should say, I don't say good, our experienced flyers will typically build 2 planes by this time of the season. Our new people will usually destroy the first one, or it'll be, all over the place,
Yeah.
and they'll need to build another one. And we usually make them work with that one for a while until they get used to working with balsa and super glue and, not getting it everywhere and that kind of thing. Yes, they'll build multiple. On the scrambler devices this year, they were still tweaking their launch devices and still tweaking their cars. They might have changed their braking system. Robots, many of them are on their second version of their robot, or at least the wheels. A lot of them have changed the wheels a couple of different times. And towers, they've done a couple different designs. So most of our tower builders have done at least 3 or 4 towers once they had a design that held. Some have done 1 or 2 and they hold right away. Some they build for weeks and it doesn't hold.
Okay.
Does that answer that, John?
Yeah, no, it helps. And I throw to Tim and York and Dan as well. Like, do you guys, just getting a sense to what's kind of going on relative to builds?
Well, for me with a small team, like I say, I'll take my flyers for example. They didn't like one kit. They couldn't get it to fly very well, so they took it on their own and got another kit from a different company and have had much better luck with that one. And they, that's just in the past 2 or 3 weeks. So with my kids, some of them have said, after the invitational meet in January this year, that, hey, our roller coaster is not as good as we need to. Let's revamp everything. And so the girls will revamp stuff. Or same with the plane, same with the scrambler and the wheeled vehicle. We'll change some things out. But, it very rarely do I ever get a kid on all my teams, because all my teams for the last 20 plus years have been small. So I don't have the luxury of having multiple flyers or multiple tower builders. I have, 1 or 2, and that is it. And so they're always tweaking designs and coming up with some cool stuff and trying it and say, yep, that works, or that one doesn't work, and they'll go on to another one. So.
Okay. There was a question thrown in the chat, and York and Dan have responded to some stuff, but I want to just talk about it because not everybody can see the questions. The question came up as, what time do you recommend arriving at the competition? And York had said he really likes his kids to get there about 45 to 60 minutes before the first event, but you also need to think about impound. So, and you probably want to get to impound for those events 15 minutes beforehand. Dan seconded that and said that, it's about 15 minutes before impound begins. for teams for tournaments that involve travel, right? So I'm thinking this is probably more for states, or if you're in a Western state and you got a really big region, right? Where the kids, you're gonna spend a lot of hours on the bus. Have you found it better to, if you can get up early and do the 4 a.m. leave from the school, let everybody sleep on the bus and get up and then do the tournament? Or are the kids, if you can afford it, are the kids better off like going down the night before and doing the overnight and then getting up in the morning and being ready to go? Do you got a experience preference either way?
Have high schoolers. Getting them up in the morning is close to impossible. So we take them right after school on Friday. I don't even let them go home, because if they go home, I can't get them back in time for the bus. So again, high schoolers have that morning thing. So getting them up at 4 would be close to impossible. And I think my parents would complain too. So
Okay.
we leave the night before.
We've gone to state. We usually go the day before and spend the night at a hotel. We did do an invitational out of state for the first time this year, and that most of our team members actually went up the night before. There were a handful of families that made it a really long day, and they replied back and let us know that it was a really long day to get up at 4:30 in the morning and not return until like after 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So I would say that if you can afford the overnight, that's probably the better way to go.
So I'll step in that too. Is I have kids that live 45 to 50 minutes away from school, and so a lot of those kids will actually go to the region competition or the state the day before and stay in a hotel, because I trust their parents to get them. I tell them what time they need to be at school and at the competition, and they are there all the time. And the rest of us, we don't have to leave at 4 or 4:30, but we will leave, like say if we're regionals, we'll leave at 5:15 or 5:30, and I'll just tell them to grab their pillow and sleep on the bus if they want. And I have yet to have an issue with that. I've also went to invitations in other states and where we stayed in hotels, and that's worked well too. So I haven't really had an issue. I'll wake the kids up if I have to, and they'll get up and be ready to go. I'll have breakfast ready for them, and we haven't had an issue either staying in a hotel the night before or getting up early and driving.
There's a question in the chat from Wallace, and Wallace, tell me if I get your question right. The question asks, what are some good tips on selecting leads for study lab build topics, and what are some good assessment factors? So I think what Wallace is looking for is like, where do you have the kids, or do you make recommendations to the kids about like places they can find information? And when you're thinking about them studying for tests or taking practice tests, like any good places to find good tests or things that you look for that says, yeah, I think that indicates it's a good test?
I'll jump in on that one. A couple things that, of course, most people should know about Science Olympiad Test Exchange. There are some quality tests on that. And over the years, at the invitations that I've put on, we have a tendency to share the tests with other coaches, and I'll swap some with certain coaches in other states, and I can get a lot of practice tests that way. Just as long as you have something to give them, they'll give you stuff, and just encourage the kids to take as many of those practice tests as possible, because you never know what's going to appear on the test.
All right. All right. Wallace typed in and corrected me a little bit. I took leads the wrong way. He was thinking more to the point of Charisse had mentioned student leads. So how do you go about picking kind of your group leaders or your event leaders, and like what are some of the things you use to judge them on?
They don't have to be the best in the event. They have to be able to facilitate, and they have to be organized. We don't ask them to know everything. We ask them to help the group gather information and share information, and be able to go over a test, that they may have taken that they have the key for. So we look for students who have some leadership skills. We look for students who have an interest in the event. They do not have to be the expert in the event. They just have to be interested in doing it, interested in having a leadership role. And then they have to be a moderate to strong communicator to help kind of facilitate, hey, so-and-so brought in these leads. Let's get that listed into our resource sheets. Let's go take a look at that. And they have to be willing to assign things out to, John, you need to bring this back to me next week. And Dan, I want you to go look on this topic and see what you can bring back and share. So that's the kind of expectation we have for them. So they do not have to be the best. They just have to be able to facilitate, do some delegating, and have a strong interest in the event.
So for York and Tim, have you guys tried to do like any kind of student leadership with events with the middle schoolers?
Not as much from our end, but what we do at the beginning of the year is that we have them fill out a form indicating what their event preferences are. And so we do try to go through all those event preferences and give them like their first or second, or, sometimes we have to go down to their third choice, but to give them something that they are actually really interested in. And we have found that that actually is a good motivator for them, because it actually is something that they might be passionate in about. And so we see that they do more work when we give them those events. And so that's worked out well for us. We have not, sometimes we will do some things where we try to bring together our varsity and junior varsity teams, for specific events, so that the varsity team can help mentor a little bit the junior varsity and show them how they're doing things. And so, there's a little bit of that kind of osmosis at that moment when that happens, but nothing as formal as what Charisse is talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Sorry, York, do you have a high school team that somebody else coaches in your district?
No. So the way Chicago Public Schools works is that every school can have a Science Olympiad team, and it's only those who decide that they want to run the program will run those programs. So right now within Chicago Public Schools, there's only a handful of elementary schools running Division B, and then we've got I think 15 teams at Division C. So.
Got it. Because one of the things that happens is the Division C kids will go back and mentor or coach the Division B students in Solon, which helps them. I mean, especially on the events that are, shared. I know the content is slightly different, but it does help them learn to teach other people and ingrain the material better. So if you happen to be in a position to have a Division C and Division B, your Division C kids can coach and mentor your Division B. And they can get leadership hours for them. Sometimes that counts for a Key Club or NHS. It certainly does for leadership skills for their college resumes and things like that.
Yeah,
we
I
do
agree
have
with
some
that
students
too.
come back to help coach, so that we've had some returning students come back and coach and stuff like that. So that's been that's fun.
It is fun.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I have with the middle school team, I have my varsity team will go down and mentor the junior varsity team. And, if they have a good idea, they'll share it with the B team, with our JV team, and knowing that if we pull the JVs up, it will help our varsity team as well. And so we do have some mentors, especially since my middle school and my high school kids are all together in the same class. So there is a lot of sharing between them, even the high school with the middle school.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun when they can do that.
All right. Just for our attendees, we probably have time for one or two other questions after the one I'm about to read from the Q&A, because we're coming up on our stop time. So if you want to get something in, please do so. This question comes in and they're looking for and I know you had talked about having repair kits and things for build events. Do you have some specific, things that you got to make sure are in your kit that they could check off or think about?
Depending on the event, everybody needs super glue.
Yep.
Duct tape is always a good answer to everything. So duct tape should be there. If they have a 3D printed part, they should have a spare 3D printed part because they're brittle. I mean, again, depending on what you printed them with. But those, we find those often, can break or be something that does break, especially when it's cold. And again, then it's specific to your event. If it's a balsa event, you want some sticks, some things that you could, and scalpels that you could use to cut and rebuild. If you lost a piece, if you lost one of the cross members or something like that in transport, that you could repair it. It really is dependent upon what is in your device that is replaceable.
Okay. So like I'm thinking for any of the vehicle events, you may want to have a spare set of wheels just in case one of them falls off and you lose it, or
Something like that. Yeah.
Wheeled vehicle having some extra, extra nylon, whatever, if you're doing the arm, extra thread, that kind of thing.
Extra ping pong balls for air trajectory because they just seem to disappear.
Yeah. Oh, and then I don't know if you caught when we talked about it earlier, Shri said the other big thing she always wants to have on hand, and I think it probably goes hand in hand with build events, is you want the first aid kit.
Yes, you do.
You want the Band-Aids, you want the second skin, all the stuff you may need in case somebody, kind of nicks themselves or gets hurt. And York's also typing some stuff in there, so thank you, York. All right.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, make sure that you're double checking to make sure you have all your logs, all the data that is important, that's required in the logs, because that sometimes can trip up students if they don't have that information.
All right.
For Mylar planes, John, you should make sure they've got some clear Scotch tape in the kit, because you're not going to be able to re-Mylar a wing or a stabilizer if they get damaged, but you can put some tape over it.
Okay.
So having that in the plane kit, and also just reminding your students, if they do repair one side of the wing, they should also put approximately the same tape on the other side to keep it balanced, to make sure that they don't throw their device off. Just a tip there.
No, that's an important one, because I could see everyone worrying about taping up the hole, but then you forget, now I've just added a few, it's probably just a few, milligrams worth of tape, but it's gonna throw all the balancing and everything, the trim work you did, out of whack. Okay. All right. Yeah, so here's a question. I'll take this one. It's just a policy standpoint, asking about kind of seeing tests and all that. So at invitationals, tests are returned because the idea behind the invitational is that they're practices, right? And they're opportunities for the kids to kind of get experience doing a tournament and learn how other people see the event. At states and regionals, we do not return any of the exams. They go through a process of being checked and verified, and we do address and have a whole system in place to address the grading. But you do not get to see tests, and we're not going over each and every question. If you really want to see what the national tests look like, every year we end up releasing the previous year's national tests. So for what those are worth for you, you can get copies of all the previous national tests. All right, last one, and we'll kind of close on this. Is there anything, as you think back when you got started in all of this, right, that you wish you knew now, or something that you've seen at a tournament, you go, like York was talking earlier about, hey, I really want to have a banner with my school name on it. Is there one thing you really wish you had with you when you went to a tournament, or did with the kids at a tournament?
I don't think I have a direct answer to that question, John. What I do have is just a recommendation to the coach, especially newer coaches. Talk to other coaches. Ohio has a round table. Come to our round table. You learn the most by talking to the other coaches. None of us know everything about these events. None of us know everything about traveling with these kids and you know, the ins and outs and what works and what doesn't work. But talk to other people. Take advantage when you're at an invitational yourself to just sit down and talk to the coaches you haven't met yet and ask them what they're doing and what's working and what's not working for them. And take the pieces that sound interesting to your team and try applying them. And if they don't work, okay. But I think that's the best advice I have, John. I'm not sure there's something specific. I mean, I know when I started out that having somebody who could answer my questions would have been great, but that doesn't always exist.
And I would just add on to that too, is that, you know, as I get older and as I work with more kids, the more practice meets you guys can go to, invitational, and there's not a lot of invitationals in Colorado anymore. But if you can go to some or create your own invitationals, even if you only get 3 or 4 schools to participate, it is worth the experience. The kids like it. I always make sure that they get medals. They enjoy winning, and even getting a medal in an event, because that regions and states is harder. But the fact that they get practice meets to fine tune their events, know how to handle stress, if they forget something, you know, they forgot their notes, whatever the case may be, and they're much better off come regionals and state.
Yeah, I will say that in terms of that practice, you know, these days, because there's the online component that's available from, you know, many different organizers, it's great to be able to get that experience in terms of having those invitationals, even if you don't have any that are local to you.
All right. And then, yeah, to Sharice's point, and I don't know, there's also, if you're interested in workshops and training, I mean, Ohio does some specific stuff with their coaches groups. Illinois runs a coaches clinic here in the fall. Ohio does a coaches clinic, but also we do a big summer workshop that's entirely online, that I know both Sharice and York have participated in years past, where you can learn about events, and we try and build in some time for interaction with coaches. That if you haven't done so, I'd encourage you to check it out and check out the website, because we'll have more information on the Science Olympiad website. But at this point, I wish everyone just would say thank you to our wonderful panel. Guys, thank you so much for doing this and giving up an hour of your evening. York, I know you stayed late at school to, you know, after finishing up practice. It really means a lot, and it was, I think, very helpful, and wish you guys luck on the rest of your season as you got tournaments and stuff coming up. And I'd offer the same kind of best wishes to everybody, that, you know, good luck on what